about the vanity of our words that we use, such things as God's emotions and God's reactions are like ours, where in reality, our reactions and our thoughts are of how things are done are more sometimes a reflection of God. So I'll give you an example. So, AJ, if you was say going to go to David and offer David a word of advice, because there comes this point in life as we become older, we feel like it's necessary and we want to help people. I have that problem. I want to help people. Sometimes I should be less desirous to help people because, was it at that one commercial, you can't help you from end up being like your dad. You go to the grocery store, a hardware store, and you're explaining all these things because you got a person standing there, they're going, and you know that they don't have a clue of what they're looking for, and you want to help them, you want to pull them out, or you see them buying something that you know is a piece of crap. You know that this thing that they're getting ready to buy is not going to work. David, you see a person going to Harbor Freight, and there's certain things you can buy from Harbor Freight. But all of a sudden you go to Harbor Freight and you buy the cheapest ratchet set you can find. As a technician, you know that cheap ratchet is going to do what? It's going to fail. It's going to fail under what? Tremendous pressure. And when it fails,
you bust your knuckles.
Yeah. And the thing is that, you're given warning signs. And so, like AJ and I was talking about, when we advance to the point of when we can take our struggles, our trials, our problems that we're having in our lives, and we turn them from the possessive of being ours, and the label of the word that we've chosen, our troubles, our trials, our stresses, our problems, all these things, our anxieties, as long as we have the possession of these things, that's exactly what they'll be. But yet, when we change them to lessons, that we're learning that we can help somebody else out, well, then all of a sudden now we want to help other people out. And sometimes people just don't want to hear it. And it's hard, that's a line to figure. So, AJ, you've got a person that you see and you recognize. And so, what's it? Saturday, Friday, my days all run together now. I'm sitting out there and I want to install a gate. And I got a 4x4 that's in the ground in cement. And so I know the only way I'm going to get the sucker out is to hit it with a sledgehammer. On the bottom of it, kind of break loose that cement. And I hit it and I hear something crack. No, it wasn't a sledgehammer. And this is a big demolition hammer. I mean, this is a big one.
4x4.
Huh? Yeah, it 4x4 crack. And I'm like, well, I'm looking at it and I see the crack right here in the center. I'm like, okay. And so what I did is that I grabbed this 4x4 and I grabbed the top of it and I decided to yank it hard. And as soon as I did, the 4x4, the top 2 foot breaks off. Now understand, I'm yanking it backwards. So which way is the 4x4 going to go? Straight in my head. That son of a gun, it hit me hard, and I'm like, oh my God, I just killed myself. And I'm thinking about it. I said I probably need to go tell Amber. She needs to watch me for a while and make sure I don't have no.
You weren't even home. I was working.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm telling you. That I was thinking about. Well, I need to let her know because they tell you with stupid head injuries, you're supposed to tell somebody, hey, I've had a head injury. So if I act stupid tonight, or if I go to sleep and I don't wake up, you need to know what happened to me. These are things that I'm going through. But yet,
Just don't snitch.
Yeah,
he would
right.
listen. I told Amy and she'd stand a better chance.
6 hours later, he finally tells me.
Yeah, but the thing is that I'm trying to learn my lessons. But the point was that was a lesson that somebody had learned and taught somebody else of how if you have a head injury, you learn to apply these lessons. And so you want to help somebody. But all of a sudden, AJ, you got somebody that you want to give advice to. And you say something to them. You find out that they go and do it, and then you want to make a mention, well, you remember what I said? And this person says, no, I didn't really pay attention to you. What do you do? What do you say at that point?
You don't say nothing else to
Nothing.
them, and you're like,
You gotta stop your feet.
I promise you I won't say nothing else to you.
So now I'm going to ask you this, and we're going to, is that your emotion or is that God's emotion? Now consider this. Think about it in terms like this, because every time I'm teaching, I will also tell you the mechanism through which I've learned. Because I have not been around too many preachers that taught me or tried to teach me the process of learning, of understanding. You know, I've never sat under a preacher who tried to teach me Hebrew. Never. I never knew Hebrew existed, Artie.
Right.
Until one day I had this thing. It just kind of come up. And so, why do preachers, or why is this knowledge not really disseminated? For years, AJ, I would go through the thing. I remember telling my pastor, I'd done been, I forget Mexico, all these things, and I said, I'm waiting on God. I'm waiting on God to talk to me. And he says, I'm not waiting on, you're not waiting on God. God's waiting on you. What a concept. Now God's sitting there waiting on me. What? And I remember the time in thinking that, I wish God would talk to me. Well, I didn't know that God had been communicating my whole life, but guess what I chose to not do? To listen, to pay attention to what he said. So many times, I look back at it now, and I realize that I've ignored God's visual clues. I've ignored God's vocal clues, written clues. That's how God communicates to us. But yet, when we pay so little attention to what is being said, what happens to us is that voice, y'all have heard me, gets quieter and quieter, and then we're all sitting around saying, well, I don't know. One of the reasons why God doesn't talk to us is because we don't listen to him when he does. And we don't really pay attention to it. So the method of this is what I'm trying to help those of y'all that wants to hear this thing to overcome. We ask ourselves, why do we not want to hear from God? Think about this thing. What?
You don't want to. You don't want him to. You disappointed him. So how do you go and, I guess, like subconsciously, how do you say, how am I going to go and talk to him knowing I've messed up?
Makes you
Or I'm
accountable.
continuously going to do this because I'm still trying to get it right.
Right. Or as Amber says, it makes you accountable.
Accountability.
It's that thing that once you realize, so we don't want to be told. We don't want to be told that we're wrong. Back gate was open.
Oh, I had no idea.
Amy, skateboarder, she probably unlocked it.
Thank you. Oh,
But the
Lord.
thing is that we don't want to be accountable, because the thing is that we don't really want to change. One of the things that's kind of been on my mind now that I'm 200 years old now and feeling it, shut up. You want to get a cushion. Shut up, little boy. When I was sitting here yesterday, and the theme that kept resonating in my mind was, how would you live knowing that, Lance, today is your last day? How would you live? What would you do different? Then I realized that is the most futile question in the world to ask yourself. And why is that? Every day is your last day to live, and you ain't going to freaking do anything different. We're going to just continue to live our life. We're going to continue to do this crap until one day we're going to wake up and we're going to roll the dice. Hey, God, remember me? I went to church on Sundays. I did this. I preached. I did this. And God's going to say, because you missed it. Because not everybody, and Bible specific, has got a list of people that says, I did these things. And, I visited the sick. I went to people in prison. I ain't visited the sick. I ain't went to prison, so I ain't qualified for that bullcrap. How does my life prove? And so how am I going to change? So I was like, wow. You know, it's like, why do you even say these things? Because again, you hope that something impacts somebody. So the thing is that what you have to do, if you want to hear from God, if God gives you a little word, I would highly encourage you to start paying attention. I was telling AJ, and I've told you guys my process. If you want to hear from God, then listen. If you want to hear from your parents, then listen. Listen to what your parents are saying, then that will reveal more. But not just listen, apply it. Apply it. Because we are dying. Although that's not going to change anything. I love the verse in the Bible says, and yet the preacher was wise. He still taught people. It says, by the foolishness of preaching that men are saved. What that says is that that preacher knows you ain't going to listen anyway. You ain't going to change. You're just going to keep on listening. It's going to bounce off you. God knows. God sends his message out. Can you imagine God? And I am glad that God is not us, because we would have gave up on us. Matter of fact, we disown people in our lives far less than what God would disown us for. But yet, we all hate users, don't we? Everybody in this room hates users. We hate users. But in reality, what is a user? Keep making demands and never gives back. But in reality, then what are we to God? The same. So I would ask, are we ever going to make a difference? And so this is what I try to do. I try to make a difference. So how it starts, if you want to hear from God, it's like I've said it. Honestly, I try not to. There's a phrase in the Bible that says deep beckons deep. If you're a deep thinker like I am, you find yourself, honestly, sometimes feeling like you're on an alien world, because you have these things and these thoughts and these concepts, and you want to share them, you want to talk to people, but yet if you don't understand them, how can you relate to the very things that you're thinking about? How can you relate to your dreams? And then it becomes frustrated that no one else is considering these thoughts. No one else is like, if you want to create something, or you expect somebody else to want to create it with you, and then you get this whole frustration thing going on. So this morning, like I said, last night I go to bed because it is a whole anxiety thing to sit up here without notes or pen. It's a thing that you have to get up here and you have to have something that actually makes sense, because you wait for the anxiety of saying, oh God, I failed you. I don't have anything, and the people just leave and you don't see them no more, and you start thinking all these things about yourself. And then next thing you know, you're all wound up, and I've just kind of had to learn to just go, okay, God, I'll wait for his clues. And so last night I was listening. My problem is that I get so focused upon hearing God and listening to God. Amber will be talking to me and something, I'm like, my mind is like, I'm still, and I'm feeling it with clutter because I don't know where I'm waiting for this little theme to pop up. When you're doing that and the theme pops up, write it down. Write it down. So today, my theme started off was down, back, and up. That's what the whole theme. I was like, hey, that works. I can work with that. That's something I can understand. What keeps you down? What holds you back? What holds you up? All of a sudden, I was sitting there, and a guy told me one time, he says, Monty, there was a day that you wrote out all your sermons. I used to write sermons upon pages upon sermons upon pages upon sermons. And I was like, and I never got to share them. You remember them days. I remember that I sit there and I had books of sermons. And I asked this guy, he says, Bonnie, do you realize what God is doing to you? And I was like, I'm not the most Captain Obvious here. I have to have visual clues. Come on, give me a clue. Help me understand. He said, he's teaching you. Oh, okay, I get it. You're going to seminary. That was my whole thing. I was learning how to do these things, how to study, how to go all these things. I'm like, oh, cool. But what good is it if I don't share it? We want to share it now. We want to share the lessons now. Well, it wasn't time. I wasn't ready. I hadn't graduated. Billy, no matter how bad you want to make a cake, until you learn to follow direction, what's going to happen? So it took you how long to be able to follow directions? You're still learning how to follow directions. Because again, we all have this thing that we don't want to follow directions, do we? But we find out that if we follow directions, what happens to us? We can reproduce something and produce something good. God's word is directions. That if you tap into the supernatural power of the word, it takes you beyond the written word that takes you down a journey. But the guy said, he says, Lonnie, you realize you've studied, you've written all these sermons down, but you realize there's a time coming where you'll no longer study like that. I was like, what do you mean? How's that going to work out? Because I'm thinking like, I'm going to get in front of people, Lance,